Welcome, everybody. And um, I guess some people had noticed that Aaron uh, Reichlin Melnick, who's with the American Immigration Council in Washington, D.C., was talking about it and saying that in 2019, the Border Patrol was supposed to have a cultural shift and were forbidden from using the word tonk. And I was like, okay. It just shows that you really don't know the culture of this agency, but whatever. I've always followed Aaron. I love his work. I think he does great work. He's an attorney or a lawyer, and he can speak at that high level of legalese and stuff. He goes on shows like Strict Scrutiny where they talk about the Supreme Court and stuff like that. And then I noticed he wasn't following me, and my some of my followers on Blue Sky were like, "Hey, why aren't you talking about all the stuff Jen Budd's done about the word tonk and this and that? Why aren't you talking about her work?" And then he's not answering, and I'm like, and the only I have no beef with Aaron. I do have a beef with the American Immigration Council, specifically with one of their journalists, Dara Lind, who, when Trump took office the second time, she had done an editorial for the New York Times because she's a fancy writer, Harvard degree and all that, can get in the New York Times. I can't get in the New York Times. But and she said, a lot of people are talking about that the mass deportation that Trump's talking about is going to be terrible. We don't know that. So far, they've just said they're going to go after the criminals. And what I had been writing at the time was those in the Border Patrol think they're all criminals. And afterwards, that's exactly what they said, right? Because I know the culture, because I used to be one of them. And so I knew they were lying. And in her op-ed that she wrote was like, she didn't name me, but she was referencing my work, saying that there's people out there, hi Arlene, that are fear mongering. And this doesn't help migrants and this and that. And I said, no, actually, you pretending that this isn't going to be horrible is what's bad. And I said on Blue Sky, I said, are you referring to my work? And we need to talk about this because you just aren't understanding what's coming. I've been talking about this since 2021. This is going to happen. And it's because I talk to agents inside the agency and know what's going on. And I know the culture. And she blocked me and wouldn't talk to me at all. And I'm like, what? I'm not saying you're an idiot. I'm not saying anything about you. I just want you to talk to me, kind of thing. And so Dara Lind of American Immigration Council, she blocks me. And I said, this just like all these elite writers. And what I meant by that is Harvard graduates, Ivy League graduates, and this and that. I'm like, you don't know the actual culture. And it takes somebody from the inside. And I've been trying to tell y'all for years, and you're not listening to me. I don't know why, if you're prejudiced against me or just don't like me or whatever. I don't know why. But you're misleading people. This mass deportation is going to be exactly as I had predicted and knew was going to happen because I could see their movements and their operations and what they were doing. And and one of the American Immigration Council attorneys got on Blue Sky and then labeled me an anti-Semite. And I was like, what? And he said, you called her an elite journalist. And I said, she is an elite journalist. She's like up there in the upper echelons. And he said, that's anti-Semitic. And so I was like mortified. I'm like, it's not like I haven't admitted that I've had prejudice in my life. I'm very well able to admit that. And in fact, tomorrow, if you can, I'm going to be on with Wajahat Ali at noon Pacific time. And we're going to talk about, because I read his book, and we're going to talk about or Islamophobia and anti-Semitism too. And I'm going to flat out, Islamophobia seriously after 9/11. And I always say I'm thankful that I got out of the Border Patrol before 9/11 because I worry about that. Had I stayed in the agency, how far I would have gone with that hatred and that prejudice. And so I was very upset about it. And I contacted my good Jewish buddy, Mo Goldman. I said, am I being anti-Semitic? And he's like, no, some people just throw that out there because, they're just trying to get you to not criticize Darlene, this journalist." And I was like, "Oh." And then her husband attacked me, and then other people from American Immigration Council attacked me, and I was just like, "Okay, whatever." That's the only thing I can think that maybe Aaron has beef with me. And I also say when people ask me like who to give money to, which organizations, I say don't give money to those big groups like AIC, American Immigration Council, because they have millions and millions of dollars in grants. It's not that I don't think that they do good work; they do good work. But one of the things I do disagree with a lot of these really big policy institutes and stuff is like when the Democrats come up with policies like DACA and all these other things that are kind of half-assed policies, um, that's being done by these NGOs and stuff. They're feeding policies to politicians to then pass. And a lot of these policies has not served immigrants very well. And I also see not specifically American Immigration Council, but I see a lot of other ones who deal privately behind the scenes with the very people that they are criticizing, CBP, Border Patrol, and ICE. So there's a lot of going back and forth. So I mean, you wonder why nothing really ever goes forward in immigration and the Democrats aren't strong on immigration. It's a lot of these NGOs with these bad policies and not demanding actual policies that would protect people and give them legal status and stuff. So I can't help that they don't like me. Aaron's not said anything. I notice he's not following me. I still follow him. These people are some of people are so unprofessional. It's like they want you to agree with every single little thing you say. And God forbid you say anything about bad about Democratic policies or this or that. And it's like, this is how we got here, y'all. This is how we got here. And they all work inside this system together. And so they're all protecting each other in this system together. And it's just really gross. It's very disheartening to find that a lot of the groups that claim to be helping, and they are in a lot of ways, helping immigrants are still also helping themselves with their proximity to power and things like that. And, there's not a whole lot I can do about that. I don't really have a big audience. Not a single one of these immigration groups has ever interviewed me about my book or anything I've done. They just ignore me. A lot of times I've been told, once a migra, always a migra, and that kind of thing. And I mean, there's just nothing I can do about it other than just to try and be true to who I am and tell the truth. And I'm not always right. I'm happy to admit, sometimes I'll sit here and be like, I think I'm changing my mind about something, or I was wrong about something in the past. Um, I see that as growth and stuff, so I think that's good. So, it looks like we got a fair amount in here now. We're about 5 minutes past. Hopefully, it's recording. It didn't start recording until, like, way into the last one, so we'll see. Um, but I do wanna say this is Borderland Talk. Welcome to my show. I am Jen Budd, your hostess with the mostest, with the Beastie Boys Sabotage T-shirt today. Um, Today, we are going to talk about ICE's war on children. And again, I'm not going to be watching the chat right now. I have my screen up so I can read what I'm looking at. I don't think I'm sharing my screen. But at any rate, I want to talk about ISIS war on children. Again, I think one of the best things I can do is to take a lot of different reporting and put it together and help you see this bigger picture, right? And help you see it through the lens of what the immigration agencies are thinking and what's in their mind and what's in their culture and why they're doing the things that they're doing. And because the reporting is piecemeal. It's like this story about this kid, this story about this shelter, this story about this, and you can't see the whole operational picture and what they're planning on doing. So I am let me go back to my screen. So today's lecture is going to be, like I said, ISIS war on children. And oddly enough, it turns out that the worst of the worst, according to ICE, are children. So it just shows what cowards they are, quite honestly, that they're targeting these children. But let's see. So Donald Trump is fighting a war against immigrants that he claims are the worst of the worst, you know, unaccompanied children who come across our borders seeking safety. And chances are that you've heard these stories. Chances are even better that you have forgotten them or even been able to see the war through all the individual battles, like I just mentioned, with each different report. And I would say in the last 2 weeks, the fire hose of ICE stories has just kind of left my brain with a cloudy coating of malaise. It's just too much. And when this happens, for me personally, I often find that narrowing the focus of ICE's criminal activity is helpful to me, especially mentally and emotionally. And I think it might be helpful to you all as well. So today I want to focus, though, on unaccompanied children. To hear ICE talk about unaccompanied children is to expose yourself to some of the most performatively empathetic bullshit you will ever hear. I hate to say that, but it's the truth. This was demonstrated most recently by border czar Tom Homan when he recounted how he forced a child to tell him about her rape and how hearing her tell that story traumatized him. So they take other people's trauma that is caused by their policies, and then they reflect it back out as if it is their own trauma. They're co-opting that trauma. They're completely unwilling to accept that it is their own closed asylum policies who put these children in the cartel hands. And instead, they insist that they are basically the white knights riding in to save these children. The truth, though, is that the federal government has a long history of putting unaccompanied children into shelters that always seem to be crawling with predators. And when it comes to placing them with family or sponsors, there have been some terrible reports of forced labor and sexual violence that extend back to the Obama era in 2015. And of course, I know people are going to say, what about the indigenous children? Yeah, this all stems from that. It definitely does. I'm just talking about modern day Border Patrol and ICE operations right now. But it definitely does. It definitely does extend all the way back to the Native Americans. So I'm going to give a link in the written report that follows this about the various reports by the Office of Inspector General. It's the Health and Human Services, HHS, Office of Inspector General page. And that'll be in the written form of this that you can link and look at it. And you can see over the years that cover the various presidents of different parties from both sides and see that there were problems existing then too. But I want us to not forget that the first Trump administration's policy, because it's Trump administration now claiming that they're doing these welfare checks and that they care. It's important to remember that in the first Trump administration, they had a policy of taking asylum seeking children from their parents and labeling them as unaccompanied. And that led to 6 indigenous children dying within their facilities. So we're going to say their names: Carlos Gregorio Hernandez Vasquez, Jacqueline Kyle Makin, Felipe Gomez Alonso, Wilmer Ramirez Vasquez, Juan de Leon Gutierrez, and Darlin Val, or Valle, probably Valle. So currently, the Department of Homeland Security Secretary Markwayne Mullin and the acting Attorney General Todd Blanche are claiming that the Biden administration placed nearly 500,000 unaccompanied children with sex and labor traffickers. All this hoopla over how the Biden administration placed unaccompanied children is not unwarranted, but is also not a new phenomenon created by the Biden administration, as the current Trump administration would like you to think. While most unaccompanied children have been well placed with family and sponsors in the United States, administration after administration has consistently failed to properly screen all caregivers. It is a problem across both parties, across all of the presidents. And to that failure, add to that failure the large increase in unaccompanied children seen by Trump's shuttering of the legal asylum system during COVID-19 under Title 42. And then that was continued erroneously by the Biden administration for another 3 years of their administration. And it's not unreasonable to believe that there were gonna be failures and that there are failures that led to children being trafficked. And there are stories of this. You can find them if you search on the internet of children working in factories and children, being forced to work in fields and things like that. So, this consistence in failing unaccompanied children goes deeper than whoever is president at any given time and begins with the culture of the immigration enforcement agencies and how they teach and train their agents to think of unaccompanied children. As you can imagine, is not good. Immigration agents are trained in the academies and in the field that immigrant children are simply just small criminals, criminals like their parents. I was told in the Border Patrol Academy in 1995, way back when, that migrant children are, quote, not like our children. They grow up faster. They are just baby criminals, unquote. And I talked about this in my memoir, Against the Wall. They literally say this to agents, and anyone who claims that they are not saying this and teaching this to agents are lying to you. To back up my claim, here's former Border Patrol Chief Rodney Scott in June of 2018 when he was the chief of San Diego sector, and this was during the Trump child separation policy that led to the deaths of the children I was talking about beforehand. So he says this to the press, out loud to the press. He says, quote, I would like to remind people too, what we look at as a child in the United States and say, oh, that 14-year-old young man, that's an adult in a lot of other countries. That kid's been working for years, may or may not have been associated with gangs. People get the picture in their head that it's the kid who lives next door to you, and it's not. Some of these kids are hardened adults. That is the same thing that we were all taught in the academy. That is what they are teaching them in the academies today. And there is Rodney Scott saying that in 2018. But it's important to note that the man who made that statement, former Border Patrol Chief Rodney Scott, is now what? The commissioner of CBP and running this mass deportation. So is it any wonder that they are treating children so horribly if this is what they think of them? And this is what they think of them. So publicly, these officials will shed a tear. They will vilify anyone who calls out their performative concerns about the children dying in their custody, for those lost within their own systems, for the ones their systems give to predators and labor traffickers. He will blame the last president. They will blame the last president in office and never, ever accept any responsibility. And they will use their failures of the very systems that they designed and they control to continue playing politics with people's lives and with national security. So let's look at the politics under this second Trump administration that now purports to be rescuing and saving unaccompanied children brutalized by the Biden administration, in their words. What is the system they have created during these last 18 months? Well, it starts with wellness checks. So from the outset, the second Trump administration and immigration officials declared that they would find all unaccompanied children from the previous administration and conduct wellness checks because they were so worried for their safety. In May of 2025, just in the first year of Trump's second term, the LA Times reported that ICE agents were going to homes and schools. Advocates, parents, and sponsors believe these checks were not about children's safety, but a guise to find people to deport because the agents were dressed for drug or terrorist raids and not child wellness checks. Some of those checks did, in fact, lead to deportations. A year later, in April of 2026, Russell Payne of Ceylon reported that ICE was looking to hire cops to do their wellness checks for them. Local sheriffs were encouraged to use the 287G ICE program authorities meant to locate the worst of the worst and to use that to identify where unaccompanied children were living and to identify the schools they were attending. This information was then passed on to ICE from these local cops. And according to Payne, he wrote, quote, local officers are given prioritized case lists that lay out likely targets for deportation and are tasked with ensuring the smooth facilitation of transfers when ICE determines that an unaccompanied minor, sponsor, or other aliens encountered should be placed into ICE custody for the next steps in their case, unquote. So note that none of those statements address the well-being of a child. Not a single one does. It talks about other people in the home. It talks about how to prioritize those cases and identify people. It's not talking at all about the wellness of a child. Not at all. So 2 months later, Andrew Thrasher of Substack discovered and wrote about how ICE is hiding the contracts and payment schedules for local bounties within the layer of 287G contracts. The program is called UAC, and that stands for Unaccompanied Alien Child. So UAC Safety Verification Initiatives. And in Thrasher's words, offers a bounty-style rewards package. They are to confirm a child's address. Confirm a child's address, and a deputy can collect a cool $500. Visit the house to conduct an inspection, and an officer can collect another $2,000 once a report to ICE is filled out. For $15,000, your local cops are required to verify the child's safety and living conditions and ensure no signs of abuse, abandonment, or neglect exist. So that means they need to go into the house and physically inspect that. More taxpayer money is paid if they verify their schools, their home addresses, and submit then another full report to ICE for a total bounty of $22,500 per unaccompanied immigrant child. That is what the federal government, ICE, is paying local cops per unaccompanied immigrant child if they fulfill all these different little tasks. That is the bounty system that your local police and sheriffs can claim for spying on unaccompanied children. So what happens to these children if they are taken by ICE for failing wellness checks? Is ICE providing these children with medical and psychological care and a safe place to live since they care so much about them? Well, we do not know. While ICE has claimed that they have rescued children from horrible situations and can point to a handful of cases, the percentage of those cases is minuscule compared to the number of children they are deporting every month. A whopping 10,000 children a month are being deported from the United States right now, according to a recent ProPublica report. Some of these children are not unaccompanied. Some are, but the numbers are not publicly available as to how many of what type of demographic the child is in. 10,000 child deportations a month is triple the number of past administrations, even during Trump's first go-around. So it seems the majority of these unaccompanied children are likely ending up held in ICE detention and then deported back to the countries they fled, back into the arms of cartels and traffickers. Way to go, ICE. Gotta love those kids. So at the same time that they've been doing this to using wellness checks to identify where these children are, What they have been doing is closing unaccompanied child shelters and denying them legal counsel so that they can deport them faster. While the administration is breaking records detaining unaccompanied children through wellness checks, it has been closing shelters across the country. This last May, New York Focus reported that the federal government was ending its contracts with legal counsel for unaccompanied children and shipping them all to facilities in Texas. Advocates and attorneys believe this is being done because the Texas courts are notoriously willing to support any immigration policy laws the Trump administration desires. It's just terrible. This whole thing is just disgusting. The administration claims this is simply because the number of unaccompanied children entering the country has dropped, but that statement fails to address the 10,000 children a month being deported by ICE and ProPublica's reporting. The Trump administration is now saying those unaccompanied children who entered under the Biden administration were not properly vetted and are being abused and have now become criminals. So we've gone to, we care about them being sexually abused and this and that, to now, well, we think they weren't properly vetted when they came in, and oh, by the way, they're becoming criminals. Okay. What this suggests is that the administration and ICE are deporting children without any legal representation. This month, the Texas Tribune's Lomi Creel reported that 50 shelters for unaccompanied children have been closed across the country. But hiring for shelter workers in Texas is on the rise. More kids in immigration detention in Texas must mean more legal counsel being hired, right? Well, according to Creel, a firm that normally handles criminal defense for indigent citizens, meaning citizens that don't have money for their defense when they have to go to court for criminal charges, that firm is being told that they will now provide legal counsel for the unaccompanied children in immigration court, which is different than criminal court. And this is something that the firm has no experience in, cannot take on because they're already too busy as it is, and says it's not even legal for them to do it. So, in other words, the Trump administration has not renewed the contracts for the firms who are experienced in representing unaccompanied children in immigration courts and has chosen a firm that cannot do the job. And it's probably not even legal for them to do the job, they're saying. For a clear and concise report on this, I do recommend that you watch John Carlos Frey's podcast called The Raid. And this one, the title is Texas Asked to Defend Migrant Kids. It has no authority to do it. And I'll put the link in the written part of this podcast. So the pattern is clear. Use wellness checks tied to bounties as a pretext to locate and give data to ICE. Shut down the system designed by Congress to protect and provide legal counsel to unaccompanied children, and then open up shelters in court-friendly Texas. Move the children to Texas and provide them inadequate or zero legal counsel. Create a deportation site specifically for families and children in Louisiana, and then send them back to the countries and cartels that they fled. And then you can hold a press conference and claim that you found the abused Biden kids and return them to their families with no evidence or follow through. It will just be their word against nobody's, because nobody will be interviewed about this. So the old system, which was inadequate and full of problems, has been destroyed. And this new one has been stood up in less than 2 years. It does not provide unaccompanied children with safety, but instead is being used to quietly deport many of them back to the cartels and traffickers. So the next time Tom Homan and others claim to be rescuing unaccompanied children from sex traffickers, the next time Homan gives the media a sob story of how he's forcing sexually abused children to recount their assaults to him, ask for the proof. Ask them what is happening to the unaccompanied children, to the 10,000 kids a month being deported. Better yet, Ask Komen why ICE refused to let asylum seeker Wendy Hernandez Reyes take her 2-year-old American son, who was a citizen because he was born here, with her when she was deported. Ask them why they turned that kid over to his uncle, Samuel Maldonado Arazo, who then burned, sexually assaulted, and stomped the little boy to death, breaking his ribs and splitting, I believe it was his pancreas. That child, the written form of this has a picture of that child because I want you to see his face, and I think he should be added to the deaths of ICE in this, and he needs to be added to the deaths of this mass deportation. It is disgusting what was done to this child, and I cannot help but think about what that child must have been going through. First, he loses his mother. Then they throw him to this uncle who threw him in a shed, beat him, sexually abused him, burned him. He's freaking 2 years old. Ask Komen why they then gave the excuse. ICE then gave the excuse when asked about this and said, well, he didn't have a criminal record. Ask why ICE is claiming the uncle was not properly vetted by the Biden administration because he's an asylum seeker as well. So they're trying to blame the Biden administration. Well, if you feel that the people, and you've said this over and over, that the Biden administration didn't properly vet people, why did you give a U.S. citizen child to a man who you feel was not properly vetted? That is on you, Mr. Homan. That is on ICE. That is on DH Secretary Mullen. If he was in charge when this happened, it might be on Kristi Noem. So they still gave him custody of a child, even though they're claiming he was not properly vetted in the first place. I think media needs to point out that ICE under this administration is the one who has failed to properly vet placing Orlin, because that's his name. So let's say his name, Orlin, probably pronounced Orlin, Hernandez Reyes. And that is why he was tortured and is now dead. When Homan responds with his bullshit excuse of how his agents are not responsible, let's remember what the current commissioner of CBP thinks of immigrant children. And I'll say it again to you what his quote was. Quote, I would like to remind people too, what we look at as a child in the United States and say, oh, that 14-year-old young man, that's an adult in a lot of other countries. That kid's been working for years, may or may not have been associated with gangs. People get the picture in their heads that it's the kid who lives next door to you, and it's not. Some of these kids are hardened adults, like 2-year-old Orlin. Like 2-year-old Orlin, I guess. So I think that that statement by Rodney Scott is quite honestly the truest answer you will ever get out of these people. But that is truthfully how they feel. That is how they feel about these children, and that is why they don't care about them. So when they sit there and claim that they're doing wellness checks, these are not wellness checks. Is there a problem with the system and putting unaccompanied children? Yeah, there is. Obviously, there is. But the majority of them did go to families, or they do go to very good sponsors. And for them to sit there and then when they do have a child and they turn around and they give this child to an uncle who they claim was not vetted correctly. They are saying it, oh, he wasn't vetted correctly. And they even had the nerve to blame the mother. And the mother has proven through her calls and stuff to ICE and demand, no, I want him to go with me. He needs to go with me. He can't go with this man because the man had a known history. It's just insane. It's just insane. And then watching the press just not saying anything about it. They just report it. I want somebody, the next time Homan's up there mumbling while he's standing in the driveway of the White House, somebody ask him this. Ask him about this boy. Ask him why his agents didn't do proper vetting and turn this boy over to that man. I don't think they'll do it. He'll probably start talking about another child that he demanded tell her sexual assault story to him and how that traumatized him. So sick of these people. So freaking sick of these people. All right. It's a little bit shorter one, but I tell you what, it's a hard one to write. So what you see is they've done away with the old system and they have created this new system and claiming that it's there to protect children and stuff. But all it is a deportation machine. And it's a family separation machine in every way possible. And they are using taxpayer monies to give to if your local sheriff or your local police department has a 287G contract, they can be doing this. They can be engaging in this. Maybe your neighbor is an ICE agent like my neighbor is. He's a couple blocks away, but he's an ICE agent. And maybe he's, maybe the cop down the street is doing this. And you see they got a new car. Did they get a new car because they're stalking children going to their schools? There's if you look this up, there's a lot of links and go to the links that I'm gonna provide you, and you'll see these stories of cops, sheriffs, deputies going 50 miles to a school to get a list of 30 children so they can start identifying and targeting them. This is Nazi level shit, y'all. It's here. It's here. There's no waiting for it. It's here. And to the darlings of the world, I'll accept your apology. I ain't never gonna get an apology. But this is what I was warning about. This is what I feared, and I can't believe it's even gone this far. I just, and I don't know what to do about it. I don't know how to get people to care. I think that they're going to have to suffer personally. I think they're gonna have to see whatever it is that ICE has planned. Somebody did ask me, what my thoughts were on ICE. I would take them for their word. So we've seen DHS Secretary Mullen recently say that ICE is going to be enforcing election integrity, election laws. Just to be clear, they don't have the legal authority to do that. And what is that going to look like? Well, if they do it, I imagine it's going to be walking up to people who are black or brown and saying, hey, and just grabbing them and then taking them miles away and hours to determine whether or not they really think they're a citizen and can legally vote. And by the time they can, then the voting systems are closed, or the people are so traumatized that they really they really don't want to go vote. Maybe they would want to vote even more after that. Um, I hope I'm wrong. I hope it doesn't get to that far. Um, but I would recommend. Some people are saying, what can they do? Well, you can go watch the polls and document things. There are groups I know in San Diego and in a lot of cities and bigger cities, they had things called rapid response networks. So if you look up Rapid Response Network, RRN, you can see where those are in your communities. Um, just going down to an immigrant group. There's immigrant groups in every community. They're going to be holding meetings. There are also now, I've seen in San Diego, there's a group called Ice Out. And so there's different ICE specific groups that then you can go look up and join and see what they're doing and then and do what you're comfortable with. Um, that's the other thing, and I might have talked about this last time is we all have something that we can do. We are all going to do it at different levels. And that matters. We need the fancy attorneys from Harvard and Yale fighting the fight in the Supreme Court and in the courts and stuff. And we need the immigration attorneys down here still trying to fight um, to help people possibly keep their status and keep their asylum. And we need people delivering food. We need people in the streets. We need people collecting money to help people pay their rent if they can't work and things like that. I saw a sign. It was a meme, but it was like a traffic sign, and somebody had written, "Somewhere in America, a little girl is in an attic writing about ICE." Oh, that is just really it's it's so depressing, and I think for me personally too, it's just like, oh, I can't believe I ever was a part of that agency, and I will say I remember I had asked as a young agent, I was like, "Why don't we if this is a crime," not understanding back then the difference between that it's a civil violation versus a criminal violation. Um, and back then, we did not charge people criminally for entering illegally. And I would say, "Well, why don't we charge them with that?" I don't understand because there is a criminal charge called 8 USC 1325, entry without inspection. It was like, we always do it administratively, and then we send them back to Mexico because the majority 95% or so were Mexican coming across looking for work, and we could send them right back to Mexico. And then they would try again. It was usually about 3 times, then they'd finally make it through because we didn't have that many agents. We only had about it was less than 6,000 agents back in the mid-90s, and about 4,000 of us were on the southern border. The Border Patrol now has over 20,000, so they have a lot. And so the question was like, why don't we charge them? Why don't we make them do jail time? And they had pointed out, and I soon learned because every night, I mean, I could have a night where I'm arresting 100 people by myself, always by myself in one night, very easily, even in one group. And um, they said, where are we going to put them? We don't want to pay the tax money to hold them and this and that. And yes, the system's bad. And we were mostly like looking for drugs. That's what we wanted. The drugs or the, repeat sex offenders, the traffickers and things like that. And every time it was, a vehicle full of migrants, it's like, it's a vehicle full of migrants. Yeah. Because you enter that thinking that you're doing real law enforcement, and it's kind of something that they trick you into in the academy where you think, okay, they're all criminals, they're all this, there are obviously ways to enter legally. We saw it at the time. They're telling us that at the time, even though they're reducing who can enter legally, which forces people who should enter be able to enter legally to cross illegally, which makes them a criminal. So we're making them into criminals, almost kind of like a not necessarily the legal definition of entrapment, but that kind of concept. And and it just again, it's confusing when you're first there, but soon you realize like you'd be lucky in a month to catch somebody as an individual agent who you had to process on criminal charges. Like they re-entered after a formal deportation. They had prior record of sex abuse, of murder, of drug trafficking, of whatever. It just is so rare. And it's still, when you look at the number of people crossing illegally on the southern border who have committed serious crimes is generally like 1.5% of apprehensions to maybe at the max on a bad year, 5%. They use it 3% maybe is more the high. And that honestly is like the Border Patrol agents themselves as a population commit more violent crimes than the people that they are apprehending. It's insane. Like I think the latest study showed that CBP, so CBP and Border Patrol, so that would be Customs and Border Patrol as one. Those agents since around, I wanna say 2008, have been arrested about 1 agent arrested for a crime every 72 hours. And it's always been this way, always been this way. Bad background checks, people well, first of all, there's no psychological evaluations in the immigration enforcement agencies. You know, David Brulette, me, quite honestly. I mean, I was later diagnosed after my attempt in 2015, long after I had resigned the Border Patrol. I was diagnosed with bipolar too. I definitely had mental illness going on, you know? And so people like that should not be allowed to carry that badge and that gun, but what we see is the same. It's interesting to me to watch this, like, especially with the David Brulette, killing. He killed the, Joanne in Maine. Um, to watch that and that he had prior domestic violence and stuff, it doesn't surprise me at all, and it's bizarre for me to watch the media go, "Oh, it's this latest hiring search, look, we warned about that this was gonna happen." It's like, "Yeah, this has been going on, like, even before 9/11." Even before 9/11, I remember standing on the I-8 checkpoint, and a trainee came running out. He'd been working there for, like, a couple of months already, had graduated the academy a couple months, had his gun, had been working out there with us, arresting people in the middle of the night, women and children, this and that. And he was so excited and ecstatic because he finally passed his background, and I'm like, "What?" I remember this guy I used to work with, he one day got called into the office and arrested because he had been under investigation the whole freaking time for stealing freight in Texas. Border Patrol agent Dana R. Thornhill, Tucson sector, in 2021 was arrested and almost got into a shootout with police because they found out he was engaging in child pornography on the internet. And when they arrested him, he was the chaplain of Tucson sector. And if that's not bad enough, his daughters came forward and said, "Oh yeah, he's been essaying us our whole lives." He was not only just like buying child pornography and viewing it, he was creating it and distributing it. And if that's not worse, the Border Patrol, it turns out, had hired him in the early 2000s, even though when he was 14, he had been adjudicated and done time for sexually assaulting a female child. Yeah. And then they made the guy the chaplain of Tucson sector. I mean, seriously. So that gives him access to what? Unaccompanied children, right? It's just insane. There's another agent out of Tucson, uh, Charles Holmes, Stephen Charles Holmes, Charles Stephen Holmes, Holmes. He actually, and I don't think they publicly reported this, but I know this because I got sources and I have the documents. He was actually under investigation by the Office of Inspector General as he was applying to the Border Patrol for what? Making dates with women on the internet, on apps, dating apps, and then engaging in what starts as consensual sex and then turns into violent sex, strangulation, and rape. And they still hired him. And he kept doing it. And then it took 4 more women to come forward, and then finally they arrested him. And then a Republican judge, Kimberly Ortiz, I believe it was Pima County, um, she gave him a bond, and his attorney said, "Well, he can't make that bond, but he could do it if it was because it was a secure bond." He said, "We could do it if it's an unsecure bond." And so she said, "Okay." And I'm sorry I'm laughing, y'all, but it's just insane. It's just laughing at the ridiculousness of it. And so she let him out, and so his case was going on right during COVID. And so you know how the criminal court shut down during COVID. And so his case got put on hold for a couple of years. And in those 2 years, while he was on administrative duty working at, one of the Tucson sector stations, he did the same thing to a female employee, which got him put back in jail and then finally got him convicted of the charges and finally in jail. That judge was promoted. Right now, there's a Border Patrol agent by the name of Con Bart Conrad Yeager, Yager, arrested. Another Tucson agent. Tucson has a lot of problems. Another Tucson agent who was arrested for originally was being investigated by CBP's Office of Professional Responsibility, which is filled with their own agents. So, they don't investigate too hard uh, for not being at work. So he's supposed to be in uniform, supposed to be on the border, but he's off doing other things. Well, what he was off doing other things, but they eventually find out, and the complaint came from somebody else. CBP had not mentioned this. They were just investigating him for the work fraud. Um, he was trafficking and prostituting children. Yeah. And he was doing this while supposed to be on duty. And then we find out that in 2014, he had an allegation of sexual assault. And all these are allegations. He's still going through the court thing, but he also had an allegation from a migrant in his custody. And that migrant, for whatever reason, the complaint ended up going through Tucson Police Department. And CBP's Office of Professional Responsibility never investigated, because they said their reasoning is because they said that the complaint was not passed on from Tucson PD to CBP in the correct manner. So then he went on to traffic children, or allegedly traffic children. We're waiting to see. He was just released a couple of months ago. He's supposed to be held this whole time because he also had apparently a steroid problem, according to reports, a violent problem, and his past and everything. But a judge just let him out, so now he's wandering around. These agencies are full of agents like this. This doesn't mean that everybody is like this. No. I mean, I have supervisors and agents who contact me. I had agents, I remember in the first Trump administration, they said that they're filling it with Trump supporters. Old supervisors would call me and say it was scary. You couldn't have a difference of opinion. You can't be a Democrat. You had to be outright gung ho Trump all the way. And these are old supervisors that probably came in when I came in, and they were like, it's frightening, the people that they're hiring and wearing this uniform. Because as you can imagine, being a Border Patrol agent, it is one of the things I did like about it, was being out in the middle of nowhere and you're by yourself. And it requires a lot of morality, it requires a lot of ethics, but they're not hiring those people. And then the people who make it into management, like Rodney Scott, who I was talking about earlier, they're the ones that get into management. They're the ones that control all of this. And so unfortunately, if you're a good person like me, you end up leaving. A lot of us end up dead. We try and come forward and say things we shouldn't be saying. If you've read my book, then you know they tried to shoot at me. It was a warning, though. If they wanted to kill me, they could have killed me. So none of this is new. And anybody who says that this is all caused by Trump and we just need to go back to the Obama years, or we just need to go back to the Biden years, is bullshitting you. It just kills me, too, when I see the Democrats right now be so like, I can't believe ICE is doing this. The Border Patrol's doing this. And no, 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 no. And it's like, they do this. They know the complaints. They know all of it. They just don't care, because it was normally aimed at migrants. And now it's aimed at Americans, and it's aimed at their constituents in their counties and in their states that are not southern border cities and so forth. So, at any rate, let me see. Are there any questions? Let me look. I've been talking and talking and talking. Performative pearl clutching. Yep. Yep. Mm. Yes, I do get lots of threats. Chief Rodney Scott, the commissioner, Rodney Scott, I'll tell you a story. He made a rape threat against me. So when Biden got in office, Biden told Rodney Scott, you can retire, resign, take a demotion, whatever, but you can't be chief of the Border Patrol. And the reason why is because On January 6th, Rodney Scott had Border Patrol BORTAC, which is their SWAT team, ready. And there was ICE SRT, which is Special Response Team. That's a SWAT as well. So they have all the highly trained big bros ready, and they were ready to respond because they knew that that was gonna happen, and they stood down, and they did not respond, and Rodney Scott's reasoning was they didn't get a call. They needed a telephone call, and I always have said, if I had a badge and a gun and I was anywhere near the Capitol on that day, you bet your ass I would be going to there. You wouldn't even have had to ask me. I would have gone because you take an oath. And so the Biden administration got rid of Rodney Scott, and then he promptly went on Twitter and made a rape threat about against me, telling me to stop talking about my sexual assault in the academy because it was giving the Border Patrol a bad name, and I should sit back and relax and just enjoy it if it's going to happen. And so when I took him to court here in San Diego Superior for a restraining order that I figured I probably wasn't going to win because he was former chief of the Border Patrol, and I did not win. He admitted that he had ordered. He said, "I ordered," and then he goes, "Well, I asked CBP OPR, Office of Professional Responsibility, to to maintain surveillance and watch me and monitor what I'm doing and all this other stuff." Then he said he investigated my rape allegations, and the judge said, "Well, what did you find?" And he said, "Well, we couldn't find anything." And he said, he looked at me. The judge looked at me and said, "Did he interview you?" And I'm like, "No." And this is how they always do their investigations. They don't do them. They just half-ass them. He said what he found out was that I was a terrible agent. If you want to see my records, you can go on my Substack on my post and go down, and you can see my Border Patrol records. I was an award-winning agent several times over, just so you know, all outstandings and excellence and so forth. So, uh, and I was a very good agent, and I was not afraid to hike and do all that stuff out here in the mountains. It was scary sometimes. I'm not going to lie about that. But so what was interesting is too about Rodney Scott when he became was appointed to be commissioner by Trump in the second term. Senator Wyden from Oregon, Democrat, was the only one who kind of confronted him, and I was sitting there watching it live. It was really freaky. He said to Rodney Scott something to the effect of, "And you made a rape threat against a former female agent who had talked about her rape in the academy and this and that." And Rodney Scott said, "Well, she had a very high," he likes to say, "I have an imagination, a great imagination." And Senator Wyden said, "Are you saying that she's like," he really kind of chewed him out, And Rodney Scott was like, "No, no, no." And I apologized to her, which he did not really. He apologized for me. He claims I misunderstood his statement. He apologized for my misunderstanding. And he said, and she accepted my apology and this and that. And he was like, "But they're talking about me, y'all, and they don't ever say my fucking name. They don't ever say my fucking name." And I'm like, so Senator Wyden's using my story, my trauma for political purposes against somebody who, you know, I mean, if they wanted me to testify, I would have testified. But trust me, these Democrats don't want me to testify. A lot of y'all ask, why don't they ever have you come and testify and this and that? Some of their staff will call me because their staff know who I am, and a lot of the congressmen do know who I am. And one of the staff will be like, "Yeah, I wanna see if she'll come," and they'll get all excited, and then it gets squashed. And it's because I just call it the bullshit on both sides. I'm not willing to jump from one side to the other without saying, "Okay, and then in Obama, they did this and this and this." It's not to say that the Democrats aren't a little bit gentler, but not really. Not really. They just make promises, and like Biden, he said, "We're gonna do amnesty. We're gonna have legal avenues." He said that they were going to of the children that were separated from their families during child separation in Trump 1.0, he said, "We're gonna reunite them. He said, we're also gonna compensate them financially for it and make sure they have, psychological care, and I think they did do that with some of them, but they ended up not financially, giving them compensation, and they ended up just walking away from it and giving up on it, just like they did amnesty, just like they did legal status, and they kept the asylum system closed for 3 years, which killed a ton of people. That's never been reported. That's the other thing. The Democrats, nobody ever talks about the deaths down here from deterrence since 1994. Has killed at least 80,000 people. And we just act like, well, they should have crossed the legal way. You don't give them a legal way. You can't expect them to do it the legal way if you don't give them a legal way. So anybody who tells you that the immigration situation is just as easy as open borders versus closed borders and this kind of nonsense, and they give you these easy answers, it just isn't. Or that they claim that like Democrats are better than Republicans on this. It's not. It's not. Democrats make these promises and then turn right around and like Biden did. What did he do for 3 years? He kept the asylum system closed. That was a Trump policy. That was a Trump policy that he kept. Deterrence policies that Clinton passed in 1994 is a Republican policy from the Heritage Foundation. So it just, you know, it's just nonsense when they sit there and say this stuff. And there's just never been any accountability. Congress right now knows about these illegal cover up teams that are now being used in the ICE killings that we have today to fuck with the evidence and do all this other stuff. They know that Rodney Scott is in that film, HBO film, and they won't talk about it. So the Democrats aren't really ready to do anything, and what it takes is, I think, just being honest and being responsible about our our culpability in all this, just like I try to be with, with the book and everything and talk about what I've done and yes, I've used these racist terms. Yes, I've done this stuff. Um, and that's the only way you can get to the other side of it and keep sweeping shit under the rug. We're going to keep being here and keep being here. We have to have accountability in this. And there's just no other way out of this, especially now that they've gone this far. Because what what they're doing is they are violating the Constitution. They have gone too far. There cannot be reform in these agencies. We have to look at this and design something better and something different because this isn't keeping us safe either. Um, as you can tell, everything is absolutely corrupt, and it's what happens when you give power and authority over to the immigration enforcement agencies that they have known have always been corrupt. What it's interesting to me, and I'll finish with this. Let's see, we're at the top of the hour. Is like one of the best things that people could comment on and talk about right now is the fact that the last Border Patrol chief, Michael Banks, had to retire because he was engaging in sexual tourism, which is illegal for Border Patrol agents, federal agents to do, regardless of if it's legal in a different country. Apparently, Border Patrol agents have known this for over a decade, and he bragged about it over and over again. The deputy chief of the Border Patrol, former deputy chief of the Border Patrol under the last administration, Joel Martinez, had to retire because he was accused of using his position to force female agents to have sex. One of the other, probably about maybe number 3 to number 5 chiefs of the Border Patrol in the year prior to him, I want to say it was 2023, Tony Barker Jr., same thing, had to retire because female agents came forward and alleged that he was using his position to force them into sexual acts. All those chiefs resigned with their retirement and they dropped all the cases. So, like, this is who they are. This is who they are. And the sooner that we can admit that, the better off we will be. For those who are good agents in there and not engaging in this and all this, you need to stand up. You need to walk away. You need to say something. Now's that time. Now's the time, young men and women in this agency. If you believe in border security and you believe that we need to do things the right way and this and that, you know this isn't right. You know this isn't right. And not only that, you're following orders from a pedophile, an adjudicated sexual abuser, an alleged pedophile, an adjudicated sexual abuser, which reminds me. So next week, I think I want to talk about Epstein and CBP and how CBP helped facilitate the Epstein sex trafficking. That's what I want to talk about next time. So thank you, everybody. I ranted for a while. I might have repeated myself, things that you heard last time, but trust me, I've realized this is like, it's like being a singer. You have to keep repeating the same thing over and over again because not everybody sees you, and it might be the first time somebody sees me and stuff. So, but I thank you for listening to me. Thank you for listening to my lecture today, and I'll see you around. Bye. Thanks.